Welcome to Globewise Entertainment, your ultimate destination for uncovering the hidden gems, shocking stories, and forgotten treasures of film history. Today, we're diving deep into the 1990s, an era packed with bold experiments in science fiction. Some of these films thrilled, confused, and even terrified audiences, yet over time, they slipped through the cracks of mainstream memory. So join us as we count down 15 forgotten 1990s sci-fi films that shocked audiences. And hey, if you haven't subscribed to Globewise Entertainment yet, hit that button now. We bring you the best in Hollywood secrets, retro classics, and underrated cinema every single week. Now, tell us in the comments, which of these forgotten sci-fi films do you remember the most, or which one do you want to watch after this list? 1. Dark City, 1998. In 1998, before The Matrix took the world by storm, there was Dark City, a mind-bending neo-noir sci-fi thriller that challenged how audiences perceived reality itself. Directed by Alex Proyas, the film dropped viewers into a haunting city where the sun never rises, and shadowy beings known as the Strangers manipulate time, memory, and even the very fabric of human identity. At its core, Dark City tells the story of John Murdoch, a man who wakes up with no memory, only to discover he's accused of murder and hunted by sinister forces. What shocked audiences wasn't just the eerie atmosphere or the groundbreaking special effects. It was the deeply unsettling idea that our lives, memories, and very sense of self could all be manufactured illusions. While the film underperformed at the box office, it quickly became a cult classic, praised by critics for its visionary style, psychological depth, and influence on later sci-fi masterpieces. Many fans now recognize Dark City as one of the most daring and overlooked gems of the 1990s, a film that dared to ask, what if nothing in your world was truly your own? 2. Body Snatchers, 1993. The creeping fear you couldn't escape. In 1993, Body Snatchers revived one of sci-fi horror's most chilling nightmares, the fear of losing your very identity. This reimagining of the classic Invasion of the Body Snatchers tale wasn't set in sprawling cities like its predecessors, but in the isolation of a military base, where trust was already fragile. The story follows a teenage girl and her family, who discover that alien pods are quietly taking over human bodies, replacing them with soulless duplicates. What made Body Snatchers so unnerving was its claustrophobic setting, trapped inside a base where soldiers, doctors, and even loved ones might no longer be who they seemed. Critics praised its raw intensity, practical effects, and haunting atmosphere, but the movie slipped under the radar at the box office. Released at a time when audiences were craving action-packed blockbusters like Jurassic Park and Terminator 2, its slow-burn terror was overshadowed. Yet, for those who did see it, Body Snatchers left a mark. The image of someone you love being replaced by an emotionless imposter tapped into deep fears of conformity, control, and invasion. Today, it's a cult favorite, an unsettling reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters don't come from outer space. They come disguised as the people closest to us. 3. Escape from L.A., 1996. When John Carpenter returned to the gritty, dystopian world of Snake Plissken in Escape from L.A., audiences were both thrilled and stunned by its bold vision of the future. Released in 1996 as a sequel to the cult classic Escape from New York, the film doubled down on its apocalyptic satire, blending science fiction, action, and biting social commentary. Kurt Russell reprised his iconic role as the eye-patched anti-hero Snake, this time navigating a future Los Angeles that had literally split off from the mainland after a massive earthquake. The city was transformed into a lawless island prison for society's outcasts, gangs, and criminals. With its mix of outrageous stunts, futuristic tech, and Carpenter's cynical humor, the movie shocked audiences who expected a straightforward action flick, but instead got a scathing commentary on politics, religion, and American culture. Though Escape from L.A. divided critics at the time and underperformed at the box office, it left a lasting mark with its daring tone and unforgettable moments. like snake surfing a tsunami through downtown LA or facing off against gang lords in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Today, it stands as one of the 1990s most audacious sci-fi experiments, a film that dared to go over the top while still holding up a mirror to society's fears. For fans of cult cinema and dystopian science fiction, Escape from LA remains a forgotten gem that shocked viewers in ways few films of its decade dared. 4. Cube, 1997. In the late 1990s, when audiences were used to big-budget spectacle in their science fiction, a low-budget Canadian film called Cube slipped into theaters and absolutely terrified viewers with its claustrophobic brilliance. The movie begins with a handful of strangers waking up inside a massive cube-shaped structure. None of them know why they're there or how they got inside. But soon, the horrifying truth unfolds. Every cube-shaped room they enter might be rigged with a deadly trap. Razor-sharp wires, acid sprays, collapsing walls, every step could mean sudden death. What made Cube so unforgettable was not just its shocking violence, but its psychological edge. The real terror wasn't only in the traps but in how the characters slowly turned against one another. With no clear villain, the movie forced the audience to ask, what would you do if survival meant betraying the people trapped with you? Despite its shoestring budget, Cube became an underground cult sensation. Fans praised its minimalist design, mathematical puzzles, and disturbing exploration of human nature under pressure. While mainstream critics were split, it shocked audiences worldwide and inspired a whole wave of escape room, thrillers, and survival horror films that came years later. Today, Cube is often overlooked when people discuss 1990s sci-fi, but for those who saw it, the movie remains a haunting reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters are not the traps in front of us, but the people trapped beside us. 5. Hardware, 1990. In the gritty wasteland of early 90s sci-fi cinema, Hardware carved out its own disturbing legacy. Released in 1990 and directed by Richard Stanley, the film is a nightmarish blend of cyberpunk, post-apocalyptic dread, and industrial horror that still shocks audiences to this day. The story begins with a scavenger who discovers the remains of a mysterious combat droid in the desert and sells it as scrap. What seems like junk soon becomes a death sentence when the machine, an experimental government killbot, reassembles itself inside a cramped apartment. As it awakens, the droid launches into a relentless killing spree, transforming a claustrophobic space into a bloody battlefield. What made Hardware unforgettable wasn't just the gore or the shocking violence, it was its chilling reflection of a world overrun by surveillance, toxic wastelands, and governments willing to weaponize anything for control. At the time, its graphic imagery and anarchic tone drew heavy censorship battles, with critics calling it too violent for mainstream audiences. Despite the backlash, Hardware built a cult following, praised for its atmospheric style, pounding industrial soundtrack featuring Iggy Pop and Ministry, and its daring anti-establishment themes. It became a film that dared to show audiences how close humanity might be to self-destruction, wrapped in a terrifying package of machine horror. Today, Hardware remains a shocking relic of 90s sci-fi, a film that pushed boundaries, was nearly buried by controversy, yet continues to haunt those who dare to revisit its metallic nightmare. 6. The Lawnmower Man, 1992. When The Lawnmower Man hit theaters in 1992, audiences weren't ready for what they saw. This wasn't your typical sci-fi adventure. It was a bold, disturbing dive into the uncharted world of virtual reality, long before VR headsets became mainstream. The film tells the story of Job Smith, a simple gardener who becomes the subject of a dangerous scientific experiment. A brilliant yet reckless researcher uses advanced computer simulations and mind-altering drugs to transform Job's intelligence. What begins as a breakthrough quickly spirals into horror as Job evolves into something far beyond human, using his newfound powers to manipulate minds, control technology, and ultimately seek godlike domination inside the digital world. At the time, audiences were stunned by its cutting-edge CGI visuals, which, though primitive by today's standards, were groundbreaking in 1992. For many moviegoers, this was their first glimpse of what a fully digital world might look like. It raised terrifying questions. What happens if technology can rewire the human brain? What if the digital world becomes more powerful than reality itself? Despite its shocking imagery and futuristic ideas, the film sparked controversy. Stephen King, whose short story inspired the film, famously sued to have his name removed from the marketing, claiming the adaptation strayed too far from his original vision. Yet, that didn't stop the movie from becoming a cult classic, remembered for both its wild creativity and its chilling warning about the dangers of unchecked technology. Today, The Lawnmower Man stands as a forgotten gem of the 90s, a bizarre but fascinating sci-fi film that predicted the rise of VR, artificial intelligence, and the blurry line between human consciousness and machines. 7. No Escape, 1994. Back in 1994, before dystopian survival thrillers became mainstream, No Escape landed with a brutal, unforgiving punch. Directed by Martin Campbell, who would later make a name for himself with James Bond hits like GoldenEye and Casino Royale, this gritty sci-fi action film painted a chilling picture of a future where society's most dangerous criminals are exiled to a lawless island prison. Starring Ray Liotta in one of his most underrated performances, the movie follows a dishonorably discharged Marine who's sent to this isolated hellscape only to discover a savage battlefield between two warring prisoner factions, one violent and anarchic, the other desperately clinging to a sense of order. What shocked audiences wasn't just the raw violence, but the bleak vision of justice gone wrong, where the line between survival and morality becomes terrifyingly thin. At the time, critics brushed it off as just another 90s action flick, but fans who saw it remember its tense atmosphere, shocking brutality, and surprisingly deep commentary on freedom, control, and redemption. Today, No Escape has become a cult favorite, rediscovered by sci-fi enthusiasts who see it as a precursor to films like Escape from Absalom, The Condemned, and even Battle Royale. With its explosive action sequences, relentless tension, and a haunting performance by Liotta, it's a forgotten gem that deserves another look. If you're digging through the dust of 90s sci-fi, this is one prison break you won't want to miss. 8. Fortress, 1992. In the early 1990s, sci-fi thrillers were often dominated by big-budget franchises, but Fortress, 1992, proved you didn't need an astronomical budget to leave a lasting impact. Directed by Stuart Gordon, the cult genius behind Reanimator, this film delivered a brutal and claustrophobic vision of the future that shocked audiences more than many expected. Set in a dystopian America where couples are only allowed to have one child, Fortress follows John Henry Brennick, played by Christopher Lambert, and his wife as they attempt to escape into Mexico with their second pregnancy. Their capture leads them into a high-tech underground prison controlled by an AI system and a sadistic warden, played chillingly by Kurtwood Smith. What made Fortress so shocking wasn't just the violence or futuristic prison setting, it was the way it reflected real anxieties about surveillance, population control, and authoritarian governments. The intestinator, devices implanted in prisoners to punish even the slightest rule-breaking made audiences squirm, and the film's mix of action and sci-fi horror gave it an edge that rivaled Total Recall and RoboCop. Although critics were divided, audiences turned Fortress into an underground hit, spawning a sequel and cementing its place as one of the most daring sci-fi thrillers of the 90s. For many viewers, it was a film that felt too real, too invasive, and too terrifying to ignore. Today, it stands as a forgotten gem that deserves to be remembered alongside the decade's bigger blockbusters. If you're a fan of Blade Runner-style dystopias or love gritty prison break thrillers, Fortress is a must-watch that will leave you both unsettled and entertained. 9. Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer, 1992. In the early 1990s, Japanese director Shinya Tsukamoto pushed the boundaries of sci-fi and body horror with Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer. A spiritual follow-up to his cult classic Tetsuo, the Iron Man, this film was not just a sequel, It was a full-blown metallic nightmare that took cyberpunk to disturbing new heights. The movie tells the story of an ordinary Japanese salaryman whose life is shattered when his young son is kidnapped by a gang of skinheads. But instead of becoming just another helpless victim, his rage and trauma awaken something terrifying inside him. His body begins to transform into a living weapon of steel and machinery. Muscles bulge, veins twist, and metal bursts from his skin in grotesque, surreal ways. What made Body Hammer so shocking to audiences wasn't just the gore, it was the way it blended raw industrial visuals with themes of modern alienation, technology's invasion of the human body, and the fear of losing control of our humanity. Imagine David Cronenberg's The Fly mixed with a fever dream of cyberpunk dystopia. That's Tetsuo 2. Although the film never found mainstream success, it carved out a place in underground cinema and influenced future sci-fi and horror filmmakers worldwide. For many, it remains an unforgettable cinematic shockwave, a film that dared to ask, what happens when human rage fuses with cold, unfeeling machinery? Even today, Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer stands as one of the boldest experiments in Japanese sci-fi, a reminder that the most haunting science fiction often comes from outside Hollywood. 10. Split Second, 1992. In 1992, audiences were introduced to a gritty, rain-soaked vision of the future with Split Second, a dystopian sci-fi horror thriller that often gets overlooked today. Set in a flooded, post-apocalyptic London of the year 2008, the film follows hard-boiled cop Harley Stone, played by the ever-intense Rutger Hauer. Stone is haunted by nightmares and guilt over the brutal murder of his partner. But when a string of gruesome killings begins, he realizes he's up against something far worse than a human killer. The city's underground tunnels hide a terrifying predator, part monster, part demon, and possibly something supernatural, that literally rips its victims apart, devouring their hearts. What made Split Second stand out in the early 90s wasn't just its monster, but its neo-noir cyberpunk aesthetic. Think Blade Runner meets Alien, with dripping sewers, neon-lit streets, and a sense of paranoia hanging over every scene. The film also dove into themes of climate change, urban decay, and humanity's fear of the unknown, subjects that hit even harder today than they did back then. Although it didn't make waves at the box office, the movie gained a cult following thanks to its over-the-top action, grotesque creature effects, and Hauer's unforgettable performance as a chain-smoking, coffee-chugging cop who refuses to quit. Today, Split Second is remembered as a hidden sci-fi gem of the 90s, one that shocked audiences with its mix of horror, action, and future dystopia. It's proof that sometimes the strangest, most overlooked films leave the deepest scars in pop culture. 11. Event Horizon, 1997. When Event Horizon hit theaters in 1997, audiences weren't prepared for the sheer terror lurking behind its sci-fi exterior. Marketed as a futuristic space rescue mission, the film quickly turned into something much darker, more akin to The Shining in space than a typical science fiction adventure. The story follows a rescue crew investigating the return of a starship, the Event Horizon, which mysteriously vanished years earlier while experimenting with faster-than-light travel. But when they board the ship, they uncover a horrifying truth. The vessel didn't simply disappear. It traveled to a dimension of pure chaos and hell, bringing something unspeakable back with it. What shocked audiences most wasn't just the grotesque imagery and disturbing violence, it was the psychological horror. The film blended cutting-edge visual effects with nightmarish hallucinations, forcing viewers to question whether the crew was battling an external evil or their own inner demons. Many walked out of theaters shaken. Some critics called it too disturbing to stomach, and its box office performance initially suffered. But over the years, Event Horizon found redemption as a cult classic. Today, it's praised for daring to fuse cosmic science fiction with supernatural horror, paving the way for movies and shows like Sunshine and The Expanse. Though forgotten by many casual filmgoers, for sci-fi and horror fans alike, Event Horizon remains one of the boldest and most terrifying movies of the 1990s, a film that shocked audiences then and still unsettles new viewers now. 12. Screamers, 1995. Back in 1995, audiences were introduced to a chilling vision of the future with Screamers, a sci-fi thriller based on Philip K. Dick's short story Second Variety. At first glance, it might look like just another low-budget space war movie, but what shocked audiences was its hauntingly human message hidden beneath the action and blood. Set in the year 2078 on a distant mining planet, the story follows a brutal civil war between soldiers and a rebel faction. To protect themselves, scientists create autonomous killing machines called Screamers. These mechanical assassins are designed to hunt and destroy enemies with terrifying precision. But here's the twist that had viewers on the edge of their seats. The Screamers didn't stop evolving. They began designing themselves, growing smarter, deadlier, and eerily more human-like. Suddenly, the line between friend and foe became terrifyingly blurred. Audiences in the mid-90s weren't prepared for the film's blend of war paranoia, artificial intelligence gone rogue, and the horror of not knowing who to trust. Many critics dismissed it as a cult B-movie at the time, but fans appreciated its dark tone, practical effects, and shocking revelations about humanity's reliance on technology to kill. And while it didn't dominate the box office, Screamers has aged surprisingly well. Today, it feels more relevant than ever, especially in a world where AI and automation continue to spark debates about control and ethics. What made Screamers shocking wasn't just the jump scares or gruesome attacks. It was the haunting question it left behind. If machines become too much like us, will we even notice when they replace us? 3. Strange Days, 1995. When Strange Days hit theaters in 1995, audiences weren't quite ready for its daring vision of the future. Directed by Catherine Bigelow and co-written by James Cameron, the film takes place in the final days of 1999, where a dangerous black market technology allows people to experience each other's memories, emotions, and even crimes, as if they were living them firsthand. At its core, Strange Days isn't just science fiction, it's a haunting reflection on obsession, corruption, and the dark side of human desire. The film mixes cyberpunk grit with psychological thrills, creating a nightmarish world where reality and fantasy collide in shocking, often disturbing ways. Ralph Fiennes plays a shady ex-cop turned dealer of these illegal memory recordings, while Angela Bassett delivers a powerhouse performance as his moral compass in a city teetering on collapse. Audiences at the time were stunned by the film's raw intensity, graphic depictions, and eerily prophetic themes about surveillance, technology addiction, and even social unrest. But its ambitious storytelling and controversial subject matter made it too edgy for mainstream viewers. Strange Days bombed at the box office, yet today, it's seen as a daring cult classic that was years ahead of its time. For sci-fi fans looking for something bold, challenging, and unforgettable, Strange Days remains one of the most shocking and criminally overlooked films of the 1990s. 14. The 13th Floor, 1999. Before The Matrix became a global phenomenon in 1999, another film dared to ask the same unsettling question: what if the world we live in isn't real? That film was The 13th Floor, a stylish techno-thriller directed by Joseph Rusnak, adapted from Daniel F. Gallowi's classic novel Simulacron 3. Set in Los Angeles, the movie follows computer scientist Douglas Hall, who inherits a groundbreaking virtual reality simulation that recreates 1937 Los Angeles in stunning detail. But when the project's founder is mysteriously murdered, Douglas begins uncovering layer upon layer of disturbing truths, only to realize that he himself may be part of a simulation, with his entire reality hanging by a thread. At the time of its release, The 13th Floor was overshadowed by The Matrix and David Cronenberg's Existence, both of which explored similar simulation reality concepts. But what makes The 13th Floor stand out is its noir-inspired style. Imagine a cyberpunk detective story, mixed with philosophical questions about free will, identity, and the terrifying possibility that we're all just characters in someone else's program. Though it wasn't a box office hit, the film has since earned a cult following for its haunting atmosphere, clever twists, and ahead-of-its-time exploration of digital consciousness. For sci-fi fans who love slow-burn mysteries and mind-bending reveals, The 13th Floor remains one of the most underrated gems of the late 90s. In today's age of AI and virtual reality, the film feels even more relevant. Watching it now, you can't help but wonder, if technology continues evolving at this pace, how long before we too forget where the real world ends and the simulation begins? 15. The City of Lost Children, 1995. In 1995, French filmmakers Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Marc Caro unleashed a film that looked and felt like nothing Hollywood was producing at the time, The City of Lost Children. This dark, surreal sci-fi fantasy transported audiences into a nightmarish steampunk world where a mad scientist named Crank kidnaps children, not for ransom or power, but to steal their dreams. Because Crank cannot dream himself, a twisted premise that blurred the line between fairy tale and horror. The movie shocked audiences with its haunting visuals, disturbing themes, and unsettling performances, especially Daniel Emile Fork as the eerie Crank. Instead of clean futuristic cities and shiny space tech, viewers were dropped into a grimy, industrial dystopia filled with bizarre inventions, mutated clones, and circus-like characters. It was a wild mix of science fiction, fantasy, and surrealism that challenged mainstream ideas of what a sci-fi movie could be. Although The City of Lost Children didn't become a box office hit, it became a cult classic for its bold originality. For many, it was their first glimpse at the unique visual style that Jeunet would later bring to Amélie and even Alien: Resurrection. Looking back, this forgotten gem stands as one of the most visually daring and unsettling sci-fi films of the 1990s. It may not have conquered Hollywood, but it shocked audiences with a dreamlike world that was as beautiful as it was terrifying. And there you have it, 15 forgotten sci-fi films from the 1990s that truly shocked audiences. From surreal dreamscapes to futuristic dystopias, these movies may have slipped under the radar, but they still left a mark on cinema history. If you enjoyed this countdown, don't forget to subscribe to Globewise Entertainment for more hidden gems, Hollywood secrets, and retro classics every week. Now it's your turn. Which of these films do you remember the most? Or which one are you planning to watch after this list? Drop your thoughts in the comment box below. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video here on Globewise Entertainment.